Very interesting topic with my friend Ali. We have James, we have Bree. Stay tuned and join us for Push Talk today. People are dying because they're waiting on us. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? So we are back, and it's May 3rd, and this is interesting because you don't come up with very many topics, Ali. So for those who don't know, this is the man behind the camera. When you hear us say Ali, this is him. Ali. So Ali is really hosting it to us today. So what are we talking about today, Ali?
Faith, to put it sort of succinctly and with just one word. But I come at my faith in God from a very intellectual, philosophical, sort of schooled way. And I'm always interested in how others have arrived at theirs. To tell you a brief story, I grew up Muslim and with the notion of God. And there was a God I prayed to and all that. When I came to the States, the first year I was here, I was in a mythology class, and of course there was Christianity that I saw, and then there was all these myths that I was exposed to. So it was like, oh, everybody has their own version of what the universe is made of, who created the universe, all these stories. So if everybody thinks they're right, then maybe nobody is actually right. And after that, I kind of became sort of this anguished kind of existentialist, atheistic kind of, sometimes, agnostic. And then through years of schooling, I kind of remained that way, but very interested in the question nevertheless. And then I had a professor who actually was responsible for instilling a deep respect for science. Like, he actually taught science in his classes to me, and he was a believer. And I got to interview him once about his faith, and it was through him that I sort of got to be able to set aside the intellectual backflips and just kind of simply and kind of humbly, in the same way I would pray to God as a kid, and kind of go back to that place and believe again. But I've been kind of uncomfortable with the place for God in my sort of intellectual worldview, because it seems like it's a sort of emasculated spot that he's in for me. But setting that aside, I'm just interested how everybody kind of came at their own belief. If there was ever a period of questioning, and if there wasn't, that's okay too. How did everyone come at their faith?
Well,
go ahead. I'm thinking my answer.
Well, for me, I was raised Christian. My family, they were real. I mean, we went to church. We went to church in Compton. Shout out to Faith Inspirational. And for me, it was always just a spiritual experience for me. When I got older, I felt like there was a disconnect with me and Christianity, just personally. I felt like it didn't fit with my values. Like, I felt like I was like at a contradiction with myself. Like, it was like Christianity myself. So But then I became just interested in religion in general. I took this one class in college, and that's when I started getting the more intellectual part. And you're like, this don't make no sense. Or just certain parts, you're like, that don't make sense. And then you start overthinking. You're just like, yeah, I never questioned any of these because I was just born into it. Like, I was just born into being a Christian, so I never questioned anything. So I started questioning certain things, just like Christmas and certain things like that. I know that one episode in Boondocks where they had like the reality of like Christmas and things like that, and I thought it was a joke, but when he mentioned it, I was like, oh, okay. So that's when I started getting interested just in like, okay, I don't know what I am, but I know I'm not really relating to this religion. And at first it was the same thing. It was more so me overthinking, like, I don't like, what is this, like, you know, like. But then I started understanding that all types of religion, they all have a purpose and they all have value to it, you know. So I wasn't angry or anything towards it, but it was just my understanding. Then I just started doing research on all types of religions, like Buddhist, Hindu, all of that. Like, I just started being interested in it because, like you said, if we all think that we're right, then somebody must not know what they're talking about, or there must be some similarity into it. So then I started doing research on Orishans. I don't know if you guys heard about that, but it's a Yoruba religion in Africa. And that connected to me for the most part because I felt like when I was reading about Orishans, which is basically like black deities, like it's almost saying like viewing yourself as not as a god, but like God body. That's why I have God body title on me, because I feel like we are special, and if we tap into that power, we can be everything that we want to be. You know what I'm saying? We don't have to be subjected to like a religion or anything like that. So that's like my roller coaster. But now I have love for all types of religion. Like, I come in here, you know, we listen to the gospel, all of that. So, you know, I think that there's power on all religion. But for me, I more so gravitate towards Orishans because to me, that's just like a spiritual connection that when I hear it, I'm instantly just like, okay, this is what I relate to. So that's me.
All right. Well, myself, I, like everyone, or at least the two of you all so far, have stated about looking in other religions and, you know, whatnot. And I myself at one point looked at and actually read the Holy Quran. And just kind of like noticed the similarities in the stories in the Quran and in the Bible itself. There's a lot of great points between the two. As far and there's a basic common theme as you know in faith and what you believe in, but it still boils down to doing right by others, and your worship towards the one God, and then of course there's some things that there's similarities, and then there's things that are different. But overall, growing up as a kid, I went to church with family and friends, but I didn't actually, that was just like when I went out of town and they went to church, I went with them, and at friends back, I would go with my friends, but my family, my mother was not in the church. She didn't go, but she didn't make us go. So if we wanted to go, we could. If we wanted to go with our cousin or whoever, it was perfectly fine. But as I got older, I started going more. I started reading more. I did have questions at one point, which has led me to read the Quran and try to figure things out. Where I was as a person, and then from there I was just like, okay, well, and I think maybe it was I don't know if it was me just following the crowd or what, but I think when I made a decision to decide to stick with Christianity, I think it was probably just the easiest because family, friends, my family background, with my family members and everything, where they came from, the lineage and what they do, the ministers and musicians and so on and so forth. And it actually just felt really comfortable and really easy for me to transition into that. And even today, as a deacon and everything, and I do sing. I've been known to sing and belt out a tune from time to time, as other family members have. But I've never produced an album. I've never done an album, but we have family members that have. But nevertheless, but I still wavered for a long time, just being out in the world and on the fence, just 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And it wasn't until the passing of my son that I made a conscious decision to take a stance and just take a stand on choose one side or the other. You know what I'm saying? And that was in 2011. So it took a number of years for me to get there. But after that, then now the growth of James took off at that point. Because my understanding of the Bible increased as I continued to study, whether reading the concordances and Bible commentaries and so on. And I actually started putting time in studying the Bible and everything, and it's helped. And it's helped me increase in spiritually, and what knowledge and wisdom came along with it, and then of course life lessons and just dealing with people. But I think it's in Hebrews where it talks about faith is the substance of things hoped for. Yeah, faith is the substance of things hoped for, and the evidence of things that are not seen. That says a lot, because we always say, I hope, but we never put the label faith on it, which is basically what, is the evidence of faith is the evidence of things hoped for. Did I say it right?
Non-faith is the evidence of things hoped for.
Hope for it, right. So anyway, but I mean, we all have a level of faith, whether agnostic or atheist or whatever. We all have a level of faith within us. Mm-hmm. It's just inherent in our natural DNA. However, how we choose to act on it is a different story. You know what I'm saying? How we choose to use our faith. And I think there's you can use it just like anything. You could use, I believe I can rob this bank and get away with it, and then go out there and attempt to do so. So, I mean, how you choose to act on it is I think, makes a difference for each and every one of us. But you have the will to be able to make that choice, make that decision. Whether it's right or wrong, it's entirely up to you as a person, as an individual. But if you believe in what you believe in, I'd say stand fast in what you believe, and then just trust with it, because we're all doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether you're Buddhist or atheist or Hindu or Muslim or whatever, we all choose the religion that we choose to stand behind. The problem with a lot of people and Christians, we seem to waver. A lot of us don't seem to stand on what we actually say we believe. And so when people see us and we call ourselves Christians, but we're out there murdering the masses, and by mass numbers, when you look at the Crusades, for instance, and there was, war, but it was in such a way that, was it, what was the war? And I have to question, what was the war for? That everybody, when these wars come about, and everything, I have to ask the question, why? What's the purpose of it? But that's just me.
So my situation may be a little different than everybody at the table. I grew up in a family that was very much spiritual, meaning they believed in Jesus, they prayed. I remember my great-grandmother, she used to literally, every Friday night, her grandkids and her kids, her kids and her grandkids would all come over to the house and they would do Bible study at my grandmother's house, because that's who she stayed with. And the older kids would be up front, the young kids would be in the back. But we were not forced to go to church. Kind of like you, it was an option for us. And for me, I personally, I can't say there was a point where I questioned whether or not the faith of Christianity was legitimate to me. There was a point where I questioned, where I wondered what more there was out there, right? So like you, I studied the Quran. I studied almost 10 different types of religions. But it wasn't in an aspect of getting to know them. It was an aspect of, for me, validating more about what I believed in my faith, right? That a lot of the things that we so much argue about, what really differentiates most faiths is not the Old Testament. Right? Most people believe in Moses. They believe in Jeremiah. They believe in Ezekiel. They believe in Isaiah. They believe in the great prophets. They believe in that. What separates mostly from Christianity point of view is when Jesus makes the statement that I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man can get into the Father except by coming through me. Now, how does that faith for me gets built? It's personal, right? It has been places and points in my life where I can look back to where I really depended on the faith that I was raised into, as you pointed out to Bree. But that I was taught and that I went and found for myself. Because when I started going to church, it was not like my grandmother picking me up and taking me there, because she couldn't, right? It was me deciding like, okay, I'm going to go to this church in the morning at 7:30. I'm going to go to this church at 10. And if this church has a 1 o'clock service, I would go to 3 different church services every Sunday until I found the place that was right for me. And I think that one of the things that, for Christians, that we have lost sight of is that we paint the picture that our faith is about our works when it's not, right? Our faith is really about spirituality, and this is something that Bree kind of hit on, because a lot of times you ask a person like, are you Christian? They're like, yeah, I'm Christian, but I'm spiritual, right? And it may sound like we're talking about something different, but it really is all the same, because there's a verse where I think Jesus himself said that it comes a point where people have to worship me not by works, but he says in spirit and in truth, right? Meaning that you have to be true to yourself on what your truth is, but you also have to be aware that little voice that you hear in the back of your head is not just a little voice. Sometimes that if we follow that little voice, or we follow that guidance, or we feel like, oh, I shouldn't be here. You ever been someplace where it'd be like, oh, I shouldn't be here, and then all of a sudden something happened that night, and then you be like, I knew I shouldn't have been here. That's something that I think is undeniable. I remember one time, especially being incarcerated. When you're incarcerated, there's so many different religions, so many different people come with their faith and trying to convert you over. And I remember one time there's this guy I was talking to who was Muslim, and we were in a computer class while I was incarcerated, and he was like, well, why are you a Christian? And I said, well, why are you a Muslim? And he went through the whole list of everything, of reason why. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in evil, right? Because whether you believe in Satan or the devil is completely up to you. But do you believe in evil? He said, absolutely. I said, well, what do you believe what do you believe is the reason for evil, right? He says the evil is designed, and this is his words. He said, evil is designed to detour us from the truth. And I asked him the question. I said, well, name one other religion in the world that has more different variations of it than Christianity. Meaning that you can go through Christianity, you can find over 230, I think last time I checked, 230 different types of denominations. There's no other religion in the world that has that many denominations. There's no other religion in the world that has so many different versions of their readings, right? There's no other religion in the world that, even in some places where they allow you to study other religions, Christianity is not one of the religions that allow you that they allow you to study. It's still to today one of the most controversial religions or faiths in the world. And we have to, and I asked him the question, my question is that if you believe in evil and you believe that evil will try to detour you from the truth, then why is it that this one religion is attacked so much differently than every other religion in the world, right? Or why is it that it's viewed upon so much differently? And everybody has a difference of opinions, right? But for me, it's that personal thing. It's the fact that, hey, you know what? When I was up in the hospital and I could call on nobody else or do nothing else, there was a particular name I called, and that name seemed to have subsided what I was going through, right? So it's personal to me. It's not just because it's something I read or something that my family raised me into, or something that I was taught to believe into, or something I explored, and something at the end of the day that I came to the conclusion that for me, it's the only way for me to go, right? And it also dictates a lot about what I do, and it kind of gives me a God conscience. And I made this statement earlier today in our meeting. I said there's some people who are not saved or not Christians or not religious who are way more kind than people who are religious. And that goes back to the perspective that in Christianity, we've lost the principle of it not being about our works, it being a spiritual connection. And that's what God is. Like, I don't care no matter what religion you come from, God is a spirit. We recognize him as a spirit. And even I think Noel Jones preaches a sermon one time, and he talks about, he says that, listen, I don't care how saved and sanctified you are, God ain't gonna crawl up in your bed at 12 o'clock in the morning and hold you in the midnight hour, right? He gives us people for that. And I think that that's the part of it that we lost, is that for me, my faith is very much spiritual. It's from the aspect that some things I've seen happen, and I've seen it happen, and I can't explain to you how it happened, but I'm okay with that, right? And that's where Hebrews 11 kind of steps in, because Hebrews 11 talks about, hey, faith is the substance of things hoped for, but the evidence of things not seen, right? Which means that a lot of times we become so defined, and we define faith by what it is that we can see, what it is that we can touch, what it is that we can physically make sense of, right? And if that was the purpose, then there would be no need of faith, because faith is the complete contradictory of what we can touch, what we can feel, what we can make sense of. Faith means that even though I can't make sense of it, I still believe that somebody out here is working on my behalf and working for my good, right? It's not designed for us to make sense of. But no matter what, even when you bring up stuff like science, and even when you bring up things like the ideological aspect of it, right? For me, science has done nothing but confirm that there is a God, right? For me, the more I get to understand other religions and understand other faiths, it just identified to me that there is probably only one way to God, right? For me, the more I've seen people and how they deal with their different religions and their different faiths, it has encouraged me in my faith, and it has taught me, and there's no, like, for me, theologically, you can't deny it. There's nobody on earth that can tell you that we can deny that Jesus was not born into this world, right? Can't deny that. Romans did a really good job of really keeping track of, I call it the census. They kept track of people who were born and who were died. They have birth certificates. Hypothetically in that day, they had birth certificates. So we know he was born, right? We know he was crucified. There's records kept of that from people who were Christians and non-believers, right? That stuff is undeniable. The question that most people have is, well, who went into the tomb and who took his body out of the tomb, right? He didn't just get up. Those are the questions that we have. But once again, that's where faith steps in, because even though I don't understand it, even though I can't comprehend it, even though I can't say how it happened, I realize that there's something or someone bigger than me that made it all happen. And for me, that's what drives my faith. Is to understand that, and that's what encourages me, is the fact that I don't have all the answers, right? That's what I think, for me, even what gives me a sense of peace, to know that it's okay to not know everything, to not have all the answers, to not be able to touch it and physically be able to understand it, but at the end of the day, it works itself out. And there's been so many things in my personal life, like I can go from like story behind story behind story, where I know it was somebody else having to do it, because when doctors said what could not have happened for my grandmother, when she got on her knees and began to pray, all of a sudden they couldn't even understand it. And these were doctors, scientists. They couldn't even understand it, but at the end of the day, they had to admit that something had to happen, because philosophically and biologically, everything that happened to her should not have happened. And we can't explain it. But again, that's where faith steps in. Faith expects you to stand up for it even when you don't understand it. And I think that's increasingly important for me.
Okay, there's one thing I want to say about different faiths. I made the statement that, which I also made to that professor who sort of got me to believe again, that if there's all these different faiths, then and they all think they're right, maybe none of them are right. But he pointed out that you're talking about God, who is supposed to be an infinite being. So we are finite human beings, and if at all different times in history we try to describe or try to get to know this infinite being, it only makes sense that we would come up with religions and renditions of God that are particular and peculiar to our time, to our place, to our ways, to how we understood him at the time, and in that way. In our own way. So I obviously don't have a problem with that. Now, one thing I think, which I also think it seems like you're on board with, is that you can't sort of intellectually checkmate someone into, you must believe X, Y, Z, ergo, there must be a God. And I get the sense that you also agree that science tells us a lot about the world we live in, but ultimately doesn't tell us, where the world came from or why there is anything rather than nothing, and that there is a lot of magic and a lot of mystery in the world that I guess is a question mark. I don't want to say that faith necessarily has to fits there, because then you're just reducing faith to everything that science hasn't explained yet, which you're going to have science eating away at it. I think, for me at least, the choice of faith became exactly that, a choice. I was sort of I was seeing that there's ultimately in an atheist kind of way of thinking about things, kind of despair that you are doomed to, because the world isn't just. There's all kinds of evil going on in the world. There's all kinds of injustice going on in the world. There's nobody to write these scales of justice in an afterlife, or there is no one to thank when you see a beautiful sunset. There is no one to thank when you just feel overwhelmed with grace and with and there's no one to comfort you in times of extreme loss. And so I made a choice to believe. It's kind of an aesthetic choice about the way the world looks to me, that it looks better, it makes more sense with a God in it. But this is what I have trouble with, that it feels like I am just kind of projecting this nice story onto the world that isn't that's just my doing. It feels like it's this nice story again. It's not the truth that can grab me. And you talked about the spiritual experience. I think I've had this spiritual experience, but it's been some time since I've felt it in my bones, and I wonder if I'm missing something by just coming at it the way I've been coming at it.
So somebody once asked me, they say if God is one, how is it that we in Christianity believe that? We say God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost, right? And for some people, that's hard to explain. How can we have a God that's one, but can identify himself in three different types of people, right? And the best example I've heard of this is ice, right? Or water, for example. Water, we use it we use it for multiple things, but water, if you put heat to it, you boil it, it becomes steam. It's still water, right? And if you take water and you sit in a cold freezer and you freeze it, it becomes ice. Mm-hmm. Even though it's three different platforms of what it is, it still comes from one source, right? And I think that a lot of it comes back to, definitely when it comes to faith and religion, it goes back to how open we are to being receptive, right? One of the things that we're taught in Christianity is that there's one verse in the Bible that says where Jesus was told that God will stand at the door and knock, and he'll be such a gentleman that he won't bombard himself into the room, but he'll stay there and just keep on knocking until we're willing to actually allow him and open the door to let him in. It's not, and one of the things I love so much about Christianity is it's not supposed to be something that's forced upon you. It's definitely supposed to be a choice. I dislike when people present it like you have to accept this, right? You don't have to do anything. It's the one thing that most religions will believe, that you have the freedom of choice, right? Some religions teach it differently, they preach it differently, but I don't believe that that's one of the things that is there. And like you stated, you have to a certain point, open yourself up to it, because if you don't open yourself up to it, you can't be receptive of it if your mind is already set to like, okay, well, how do I prove it, right? And again, it goes back to the aspect that faith is something that you're not supposed to be able to understand. You're not supposed to be able to explain. You can't. And there are some things about faith that we can explain, right? There's some things about faith, like why is it that you can be around, like you guys have ever been around a person that just their personality alone makes you a better person, right? That's something that's done spiritually. It's not just something, oh God. It's not just something that that is just that just happens, right? Because there's some people who literally, and it can go either way. Some people, you go around them and you've been having a great day, and because they're having a bad day, everybody around them gonna have a bad day because they're having a bad day. But there's some people, like, you've ever been around a person and be like, I don't know why I like you, and I don't know why I want to hang around you, but I need you to stick around, right?
Something about you.
Something about them. And that's that whole, the crazy, one of the things I love about seeing the way my grandmother passed away is that somebody always asks me a question, or they always make the statement that you guys were blessed because your grandmother didn't just die. Like, there was this process she had to go through. And I always argue back that I don't know whether death is not cool, whether a person just immediately dies or whether you have to watch a person die. Either way it goes, it's a nightmare, right? But one of the things that I love so much about watching her transition over from this life into the next life is that she had such a strong faith that despite everything that she was going through, and even when she didn't see what the outcome was going to be, she trusted the God in which she worshiped all her life to take care of it. And it was interesting because, one of the things I always tell people, like, before my grandma, death, you talk to me about death, I didn't want to have the conversation. And it was something that was like that scary part of me, like, oh my God, like, I do have to die one day, right? But my grandma, like, she really just opened my eyes up to, like, how faith can actually give you peace in situations that the mental, the carnal aspect of us would never find peace in, right? And I think you kind of hit on this earlier, like, you took to faith because of the fact that you had to believe that the world was better than what it looked like, right? And you had to have something. But if we can do that, and we don't understand every aspect of this life, right? Let's be honest, we don't understand it. Somebody said to me, E equals MC squared. I'm gonna be like, okay, you tell me what that means, and they probably ain't gonna be able to explain it to me, right? I don't understand it, but the reality is that I know that E equals MC squared because all my life I've been taught E equals MC squared, right? All my life, like, I don't see how we cut on lights, but all my life I've been taught that electricity moves faster than any other thing that we have in this world, right? Even though I don't see the electricity, I understand it's there. Same thing, even though we don't see wind, we see the impact wind has. If you see a hurricane come through your neighborhood, you know a hurricane has been through your neighborhood, even though you didn't see the physical hurricane. Right. You've seen the impact of what the hurricane did to your neighborhood. And even in faith, I think that one of the things about faith that is so interesting is that you don't always see it, you don't always understand it, sometimes you don't always feel it, but if you stick around and if you have an open enough eye to it, you can see the impact it has on things and people around you. And I think that's also important because, I mean, even in this business, you can kind of see how, even amongst us at this table, like, there's differences that Sean over there has made into my life, and there's different things that he's made me think about, different things James has brought, different things Bree has brought. And not only has it been to things to where, like, I can pinpoint and be like, oh, Bree, this is something that you need to work on. There's things that me watching the way Bree lives or me watching the way James lives makes me evaluate myself. And I think that a lot of times, even when we come with faith, when we talk about faith, the reason why a lot of times people don't want to really deal with it, because you can't deal with faith without having to do some kind of self-evaluation on yourself. And a lot of people don't want to deal with self-evaluation because they realize, and this is true, like a lot of times people realize that as much as great as they think they are, there's a lot about themselves that they don't want to deal with and they don't want to adjust. So it's easiest for me to believe that there's nothing there and nobody's judging me and nobody's looking at me and nobody is going to hold me accountable, because at the end of the day, I don't want to hold myself accountable.
Yeah.
And faith challenges that.
But it doesn't stop others from being able to look at you and assess what they see either. And I think yesterday we talked about the United States being in other countries and giving towards other countries and not wanting to look back within its own borders to see the difference in what needs to be done within the country itself, but be the first ones out the door to help someone else outside of their own borders and everything. And so when you said that, it made me think about that conversation we had. And we do have to self-reflect, and self-reflection is necessary. I'm going to say is necessary for people no matter what, because you, at the end of the day, you have to be like, man, did I handle that situation well? Do I need to apologize? Man, maybe I could have did better more. Maybe I could have did better. Maybe I could have did or said something differently. So self-reflection is huge. I think just on a daily, natural basis, just in general. Unfortunately, not everyone does, and if they do, sometimes it happens to be at 1:30 in the morning because they can't sleep because of the things that they said or did the day, earlier in the day, and it affects us, and we just don't know how it affects each and every one of us. As a parent, I have to reflect on, as a parent, I reflect on, did I say the right thing to my child? Am I teaching them the right way? I question, because I don't want to make any mistakes in raising a child that is going to grow up to be a serial killer. But at the same time, I don't want them to feel like they are being bullied either. So I have to teach them how to defend themselves. As a parent, am I doing the right thing? Did I say it right? Maybe I didn't.
That's where the faith comes in.
Yeah, I'm going to say, isn't that a part of faith?
It is.
You're like, it's going to work out at the end of the day. That's what I have to tell myself. Like, I've made mistakes, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I'm here. Like, I worry about the present, not about I try to worry about the present. I'm not perfect, but as far as self-reflection, that's something that I try to do for myself every day, and it's actually difficult because like you're like looking at yourself in the mirror, you're like, dang, like you said, I'm not perfect. Like I do have these issues, and sometimes you don't even know you have these issues till you go through something traumatic. Then it's like, then I have to really look within myself. But I wanted to say something about being an atheist. I do feel like how you said, to piggyback, I feel like it's easier to, because like you said, sometimes it's overwhelming to figuring out your purpose and why certain things happen. So you kind of just go to it. But my ex, he claimed he was an atheist, and he did it after his mother died. And for him, it was like no hope for him. He just felt like, well, she doesn't go anywhere. She's just gone. And it was easier for him to just believe like that nothing happens instead of really feeling those emotions. But as far as like naturally just like falling into that faith, I feel like for me, I had a lot of questions. Like all through college, I was like, I don't really, like I believe in Christianity, but I don't believe in, certain things. I was always juggling with that internally. And it was until I decided like, I just don't know. And like, I'm just going to live my life and figure it out. Then that's when things happen naturally. When I stopped putting so much focus on it, that's when I naturally came across Orishans, and I came across certain things. And it actually came to me. It gravitated towards me. Like, I'm pretty sure Christianity probably gravitated towards you. So it's like, when you stop trying so hard and you just like, okay, I know I have my own relationship to the Creator. And that's what I'm going to build on. And eventually, whatever comes to me, whether it's religion or my purpose, it's just going to happen naturally. So that's how I fell into it.
Yeah, I feel like, and I want to thank you for allowing us to talk about this, because I think a lot of times this topic kind of gets lost for folks. They don't get this space to talk about it, and it just kind of becomes, it's one of those basic questions that science has figured out, or somebody has figured out, but I don't need to think about it. But I think everybody, one way or the other, falls on some kind of background belief, and it's best to bring it to light and bring it to the forth and then talk about it, and make it okay to talk about these kinds of things. So, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would share this. So one of the things that really caught me one time, I had a friend who was atheist, and I remember us being in the Walmart parking lot, and he slammed his finger in the door, and he yelled out, "Oh Jesus," right? "Oh Jesus Christ." And I find it interesting that no matter what religion you come from, even I have Muslim friends, I have Buddhist friends, I have a lot of these friends now, when they find themselves in a hard time, they'll yell out, "Jesus Christ," or "Jesus Christ, why did that happen," right? And or something along those lines. And even Muslim friends of mine, they'll be like, "Jesus, you're doing too much," right? And it's interesting that I think that a part of who we are, talking about the spiritual aspect of it, understands that there's something bigger than us, right? The spirituality of us understands there's something bigger than us. And there's a verse in the Bible that I love so much. The Bible says that when we know not what we are to pray for, the Spirit makes intercession on our behalf, murmuring things that we can't even understand. What it means is that our spirit man is naturally speaking to God and saying things on our behalf that we don't even understand, that we may need, or that we in that season of our life we may not be okay with. Like Bree kind of hinting on the fact that she's just really focused on just doing right by people and doing right by herself, and not really focusing on any particular religion, right? But her spirit man knows that, hey, this is something that Bree needs, even though she may not understand that she needs it right now. We're gonna start making utterance, or we're gonna start speaking on behalf of Bree, because she may not understand it. And I think that even now, right, to say that I'm a Christian, as James pointed out, the fact that he's a deacon earlier, I speak in people's pulpit all the time, right? You've been there. One of the things that has been so interesting for me is that one of the things I cannot explain, and I'm okay with not being able to explain this, is what happens to a person when you're caught in the atmosphere. What happens to a person when you are in an atmosphere like you just went there to participate, and all of a sudden now you stand up, you got your hand lifted up, and you don't even know how you even got to this point, because you don't much believe in this God, but yet something made you lift up your hand, right? Something gave you goosebumps where you didn't even understand, or you don't even know what they're preaching about. You didn't even know there was a John 3:16 in the Bible, but something about it, when it was spoken to you, gave you goosebumps. And that's when I believe that, like, the spirit of a person can speak to the spirit that's within us. And that faith again goes to the principle of, I don't understand like why I'm feeling goosebumps from TD Jakes preaching this message, but something about what he just said just gave me goosebumps. Jamal Bryant, we show that clip. Every single time we show that clip where he says that, not only will my name be on the back of the check, my name will be on the front of the check. That has a way of speaking to my spirit that, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't get it, and I don't understand it. But I agree with the fact that, hey, my name doesn't only need to be on the back of the check. My name needs to be on the front of the check too, right? And even though I may not be able to see it, or I may not be able to see the fruition of how it's going to come to pass, one of the things that we are taught, definitely when it comes down to faith, is that it's not meant for us to understand. We can go throughout the Bible, to every single person throughout the Bible, they didn't understand how they got to where they got to. They didn't understand why they had to go through the journey in which they had to go through. There's not a person in the Bible that you can pinpoint that say that they accepted the calling, that they were okay with it, they were okay with the process. Not one of them. From Adam all the way to the book of Revelations and John, literally, everybody had a problem and nobody could understand it. Paul himself said, like, I prayed 3 times that God would take this thorn from my flesh. And only thing he would say to me is, my grace is sufficient, which means he never answered Paul's question on why he had the thorn. He never told Paul how to get out of the thorn. He just said, listen, Paul, you got to trust me in the process. Faith, right? And I think that no matter who we are, when we work off the principle that we're not a faith abiding person, or we're not a faith believing person, that's a lie, because we have faith in something. Everybody has faith in something. Like, none of us came into this room saying, I'm just going to sit down in this chair and not even look to make sure the chair was there and just sit down, right? I had faith that when I set my behind down, this chair was going to hold me up, right? All of us have faith in something, whether it's in the food that we eat every day, whether it's in the fork that we use to pick up that food. We have faith in something. The question is, where do we choose to put that faith? And I think that that's extremely important. And I think that that's something that everybody has to decide for themselves. And that's a choice. And I'm so glad that the God the higher power I serve, he makes that a choice for me, right? He doesn't make me have to beat somebody on the head with the Bible in order for them to get it. He just literally in Christianity, he teaches us just to live your life. And the Bible that people see should be the life that you live. And I think the brokenness, and I know we're not just talking about Christianity, but I think a part of the brokenness in Christianity is more people are talking about the words in the Bible but not living the words. And that's where people get confused, because now people tend to think that, okay, the Bible says we have to live a perfect life, and if I don't live a perfect life, I'm going to hell. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says that we are all sinners saved by grace, and that the only thing that prevents us from going to hell is the fact that we have somebody who died on the cross for our sins. That's what it teaches us. It doesn't teach us that anybody's perfect. It doesn't teach us that we're all not going to make mistakes. It doesn't teach us that I don't have a right to learn from Bree, and Bree doesn't have a right to learn from me. I don't have a right to learn from my Muslim brother, and my Muslim brother doesn't have the right to learn from me. It teaches me that no matter where a person's at, I need to love them where they're at. It teaches me that in spite of whatever my situation is, that I serve a God that's bigger than my situation, that can handle the situation even when I can't handle it myself. And those are the things that, for me, keep me motivated. And again, from the perspective that I have personal testimonies of times where I went out and said, I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know why it's going to work, but God, I'm trusting you that it's going to work. And all of a sudden, it worked. And that's something I can't explain. And even to the day, we'll never be able to explain it to you. But the old people will say, I can't explain it to you, but God. And they would leave it at that. And what that meant is that I may not have the answers to it, but there is somebody who does have the answers to it. And you want to know, take it to him, pretty much. And if it's meant for you to get the answers, he'll give it to you. I mean, we thinking about just life in general, how you talked about how, like, people have tried to create God based upon the time in life they were in, right? If we look back through life, even when you think about things like HIV, right? 20 years ago, HIV, if you got it, was a death sentence, right? We didn't have faith that we were ever going to get to a point where people become undetectable, where it would not even be a big thing. Like, a person has HIV, you cool, whatever. As long as you ain't got, now it's like, well, as long as you ain't got herpes, I'm good with you, right? You can have HIV, but just don't have herpes, right? I can't get rid of that. But I mean, it's just the fact that we have evolved so much. And I think that what happens is that, from that perspective, is that what happens is that people, what God has been teaching us is that even when you can't see it, even when you can't understand it, just know that ultimately I'm taking care of it. Like, ultimately we will get to a cure to cancer. Ultimately, cancer won't be as deadly as it is now, right? But we may not see it in my generation, but I know it's going to happen. So that's what faith teaches me, and that's what my faith teaches me.
Awesome.
So that
Yeah, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, we can end up just right there.
Well,
that's it.
did you
Unless
have anything to say, James?
No, I just enjoyed the topic. I enjoyed being able to, be able to partake and share, learn from you all on today, and just kind of, have some moment to reflect on, like, wow, okay, I actually did come from a long way, and things in transition over and over and over again, transitioning from one level to the next, to where I am today, and there's still more to come, and I believe that I have complete, that there are things that are going to take place in my life that are, sorry.
Yeah, you way out of camera. I'm like,
that things are going to take place in my life that I truly expected to take place, with a little bit of work on mine, but definitely having the belief and the faith that they are going to come to pass.
Well, I just want to say that It's very important to have knowledge of self. That's what I learned just from my journey. Knowledge of self is important. Believing in yourself, believing that you have the capability to get through everything. And I just encourage people to not think too much, even if they're confused about vision or their spirituality, not to think too much and just go with the flow and just listen to yourself, listen to your intuition, because that's how it grows. That's all I have to say. And thank you, Ali.
Yeah.
And I want us to do a part 2 as well, because I feel
Okay.
like we individually, because we could talk, I could go forever.
Yeah.
James would probably go forever. Sean can go forever.
Yeah, I can.
So I feel like we should
I
have
can
a
keep
part
talking.
2 for sure.
Absolutely. I will save what I have to say for part 2, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So thank you again, Ali,
Yeah,
for
of course,
choosing this
thank
topic,
you.
and maybe we'll pick it up on Wednesday. But I wanted to just let everybody know who was out watching. We had an amazing time with Pastor Lisa and Shani yesterday. We have so many different things getting ready to happen, so many things happening right now. We have our 4th One Accord Conference on May 21st in Augusta. Then we followed by our 5th One Accord Conference in Macon on June 25th.
Yeah.
And then we have our One Accord Gala that'll be hosted at the CNN Omni on July 16th. So we have a lot of things going on. You guys, early voting started yesterday. If you have not been out to register to vote, or you have not registered to vote, or you haven't go out to early vote, let's not have an excuse. Let's not let SB 202 hinder us from getting out. We have to get down and vote, because like this panel we just had, the only reason why we're able to come together on this table until tomorrow, be blessed.
This is the land of the free and the home of the brave who dress up as cowards on Sunday. We are in the midst